overall context, then what happens is that we need to correct the structural imbalance, and that's what it's all about. You know, agriculture, for example, has 60% of our population, some employed, some quasi-employed, some unemployed, and all that kind of stuff, but it produces only 18% of our GDP. You know, 60% of the population producing 18% of GDP, whereas at the other end of the spectrum, services produces around almost 60% of GDP and has about 20% of the population employed in it. And manufacturing is stuck somewhere in the middle with about 20% of the people producing about 23-24% of GDP.
So do you believe that this phasing is really the reason why most people feel the growth doesn't touch them and they don't feel it?
Absolutely, because, you know, if 60% of people, if there's disguised unemployment, for example, in the agricultural sector, and the trickle-down effect is not happening to those people because they're not employed. I know that the NREGA scheme has helped a little bit and so on and so forth, but that is just barely skimming the surface. The reality of the situation is that unless the structural balance is properly sorted out, I think we are going to have this issue coming up again and again and again.
Okay, we're not breezing through each of the points here. Go ahead.
Okay, can I just come in? You know, when you're really talking about the structural imbalance that is existing, I think one need to really go back to the basic question that was really put across in terms of the growth versus development. The question is, how do you change this kind of a structural imbalance? Is it just merely in terms of the outlays, changing the outlay patterns? Or it is in terms of looking at that what are the kind of, what's happening? Why is it that the productivity on the farm sector is really low? Why is it that we are not getting that kind of efficiency levels in different kinds of sectors of the economy? And to my mind, I think one of the biggest sector problem is that we don't have people with the right kinds of skill sets. And if we don't have people with the right skill sets, you can never really expect to get that kind of a productivity levels.
So that comes back to planning and education in that context.
In terms of not just merely planning in terms of the education, but also looking at it from the point of view of what kind of priorities are we really setting aside for the purposes of taking the growth down to the Aam Aadmi itself.
Absolutely. Employment, employability, and therefore, you know, education and skill development to facilitate that employability.
And I think it's a fair point that you'll have raised, that there's growth and then there's development and there's up there and down there. And there seems to be a translucent veil out there in that context of whether one can see that and feel that. Otherwise, the growth is not any good. But I think we're very clear that growth at that level has to cascade down. And I think part of it could be actually the government's onerous responsibility to do that. I'm going to go to one more topic that I'm going to necessarily ask you. When the finance ministry comes out with what they consider to be the budget, that becomes the centerpiece for the entire year. But actually, there are so many other key developments. When the education minister wants to come out with his 5-year plan, it doesn't get that kind of limelight. The aviation minister would want to articulate his. The law ministry and the HR ministry want to do that. Do we actually believe also that we should be giving the same kind of forum and importance to at least the key 7-8 ministries, where the union budget is one aspect of our entire situation? And is there a balance that we need to bring about and recommend to the government?
I completely agree with you. I think this budget peronia, if I may call it, is the legacy of our high taxation and all other things that we had. So everybody waits to see taxes are going up, taxes are going down, and, you know, then make some arbitrage and so on and so forth. So that's what the budget was about. I think times have changed now. Our tax rates are lower. We are still going down. Budget is important element, but only one of the elements. And how the budget is utilized by education or shipping or IT industry is not being talked about. And I think we should talk about it, and that's where the accountability comes.
Right.
See, finance is just giving money. What is happening to that money? Who is utilizing it? What are we getting out of it? That finance ministry can't answer. Let's be fair to them.
I think you have a strong voice in Delhi. Would you recommend that different ministries would have their day in Parliament in a 365-day year to articulate their aspects?
You see, first, look at budget. Why the budget is given? Because there is a provision in Constitution of India that there is yearly budget. Yeah. That's why the budget is given. And in this budget, that every department gives their demand. And those demands are, again, has to be passed. And that has got the Parliament not. And then only this has to be done, because any ministry you go and ask anything, Education Minister will ask, he wants everything. Civil Aviation or Minister of Defence. But what they do, they give priority only to the defense ministry, whatever is there, and balance money as per the requirement, it goes to the cabinet, and cabinet takes the decision, and then it gets allocated. So I don't think that it goes like that. Now you think about the accountability. Accountability also, there is a provision in Constitution of India that ruling party is accountable to the public, and every 5 years election takes place, and they see if the public has to see the account, and though if the parties work good, they come back, otherwise they don't come back. This is the only governance you can do.
That's half a generation.
Immediate governance you cannot have that. Today you are elected the government and you see 5 years time has to be given.
I don't think the accountability is more on election. I think the accountability more, is about a report card and a sense of result-oriented structure, which I think this country has maybe suffered from in the past in that context.
To some extent, that report card is there every single year. The Economic Survey of India precedes the budget every single year, and that is really, in reality, a report card of the working of the government, how successful it's been, how badly it's done, inflation has been under control, various parameters, and so on and so forth. Is that enough? I dare say it's probably not enough, because a whole slew of other things need to be done. But to some extent, there is that accountability sheet which precedes every single budget every single year.
No, but it has to be added with education survey, it has to be added with infrastructure survey. So what I'm saying is economics is one part of the whole deal. Yeah. The results are going to be delivered at another level. So we need survey for each one of them and measurable and report card on that.
And in fact, dissemination of information, because from what I can see here in the audience, the communication seems to be a big problem when it reaches down to that context. So one common question I'm going to ask just everybody for 1 second, and then we're going to throw that open, and maybe you can take that. So, because there was a question here about us, our tax rates. So as a general young audience here today, do you think we're now a reasonably taxed country? Are our tax structures reasonable? No. Not really? Okay, fine. Maybe then you want to comment specifically as far as that goes, and we can talk about it.
It was a question regarding the previous discussion which we were having. I wanted to ask, isn't the election actually a report card for the government? Because the government has been performing for 5 years. So when it contests the election, it is like a report card, or it's like an accountability for the government only. I recently came across a book which said fortune lies at the bottom of the pyramid. That guy also, my dear friend, also spoke about the 60,000 crore waiver which the government gave. But didn't the end justify the means? I mean, the Congress came back with thumping majority.
So my question to you is that, is it good enough for you and for young India that 5 years to give a thumbs up or thumbs down is a good enough report card? Or do you want to know on an annual basis? Because at the end of 5 years, it's half of a generation moved on from that point of view. You turn from 25 to 30 or from 21 to 26. So don't you think that's some of the most critical years of your life to have felt that you could be back in something that is quite different?
Ronnie, may I answer this question if I may?
Yep.
See, the issue of election is about choice between A and B. So one elected only means that A is better than B. The measurements have to be absolute. See, we are in a global environment. We have to check where we are compared to 5 years ago, compared to all our other countries. Have other countries done better than us? Then in spite of election result, I won't be very happy. So election result is one of the good indicators, but is not at all a complete indicator in today's global environment, where we need to compare ourselves with all other countries and see how we are moving. For example, I mean, much used China syndrome, if I may call it, China is moving much faster in various parameters. So election victory doesn't mean that we are doing better than China, isn't it? And if we don't do it, we will keep on winning elections and we will still be behind, That's the point.
No, that's a fair comment. Shivali, do you think we're a reasonably taxed country now, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, fine. Any viewpoints specifically on the tax structure that you want to talk about?
I don't have any viewpoints specifically on tax structure, but I have something to say, is that everything goes in a cycle. First of all, the government comes into existence, and as sir said that every year we have the report that comes out. But that report is actually based on Aam Aadmi or normal public. But is it really having an impact on normal public? Now, every day, suppose we'll have a report that, inflation rate is decreasing, it's increasing. We'll have 0.91% as the last inflation rate. But even when it was 7%, the sugar price was 28 rupees per kg, and even when it is 0.91%, the sugar price is still 28 per kg.
And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right that the consumer spending index, the consumer spending inflation, is at 10% when actually we got a sub-zero inflation rate.
So all these rates are actually making an impact on public, or they are just figures, or they are just statistics, which is actually not making any impact on public or on Aam
Yeah. And if anyone wants to add on to that specific one, but again, the general sense seems to be we don't get to touch and feel this. So it's nice that everyone understands, talks about growth, but where is it? Where is it reflected? Where is the deflationary trends reflected also?
There was a question from here about CPI. Hello sir, I'm Ruchika from SIMSA. What I want to really ask is, as my friend pointed out, the CPI hovering around 10%, the percolation of the lessening of the prices has not been felt by any of the people. On the other hand, we see the corporate sector are flushed with liquidity, people lining up their IPOs. Can you see that there is going to be a balance between what the consumers expect and what the corporate industry, India Inc. as per, is going to do?
I think that's a very fair question. Skara, would you like to just sort of broadly answer, take that?
Well, I would like to look at it a little bit differently. We're looking at it as a zero-sum game. We're looking at a fixed amount of money and we're deciding whether we should give it to India Inc. or whether we should give it across to the Aam Aadmi. I think we should get out of that mindset. Today, the world is a zero-sum game, not just India. You are in a great position where growth rates are presumably higher in India. They're perceived to be higher because we have a demographic profile which is going pro-young. We've got a great mismatch in terms of where our demands are vis-a-vis the rest of the world. They've come to saturation points. What the government needs to be doing is looking at what they can give to corporates as a catalyst to attract funds to come into the environment. We don't necessarily need to be giving handouts to one sector at the cost of the other. They've got to look at it more from the point of view of acting as a catalyst. In that particular context, at the risk of us representing a corporate industry, we're saying we're not asking for deficit financing for the industry. What we're saying is give us the sparks that's needed for us to get our growth coming from international capital. If they look at that, I think we're talking about a much bigger overall growth for India without compromising between the Aam Aadmi and the corporates.
From KJ Sumaya, going back to your question about the taxation, what I feel is that as far as the professionals are paying a healthy amount of tax, they are contributing to the taxation revenue of the government. But in India, we have a huge black money market. And I think that is something that the government really needs to look at, because if it can control the black money market and you can tax the businessmen, the huge businessmen who are not paying the taxes that they should be paying, then we won't even probably be looking at a fiscal deficit, because we'll have a huge revenue that is flowing in, which was not there earlier. So what can be done about that?
And may I ask you just one question? Do you believe actually that this compliance is carrying on now, or it's basically a historical situation at the time in which we had 98% income tax, so everyone felt that was the right thing to do?
Very honestly, I don't believe the compliance is there yet, because my parents are both, they are professionals. I see them paying a lot of tax, but I have friends whose parents are businessmen. I won't name anybody. But I see them, I know for a fact that in conversations it comes out. Because for example, if you look at the IRS in the US, they have such a strict policy when it comes to paying the correct amount of taxes. So can't we have a stricter implementation here in India?
So that's a view of young India. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. In fact, that's an interesting point. And whether, in fact, it's a process that we have been through. And you would have noticed in past from where we were to very high level of taxes. Today we are in a much better situation. There isn't as much of a black money. And slowly and steadily the government has been working on it. So we are in a much better situation today. But what can be done further? I feel that a simpler administration and very fair and just system of collection of tax, that could help. And in fact, it can not only help the sector within, where it can encourage more compliance from within India, but also to attract foreign investment. Because today, most of the foreign investors who are looking at doing business with India, they are extremely unhappy about the hardships they have to go through because of our tax collection systems and very aggressive assessment.
No, Ronnie, I think someone or anyone has said that it is in our DNA not to pay tax. I strongly object to it. I don't think it is anything about our society that
I was baiting the audience here by saying that. But
No. What I'm saying is it is all about environment that we have created which forces people to act in some way. You change the environment as the tax rate goes down. When 90% there was one level of DNA, if I may call it. Now it is at a different level of
yes, I do believe
so I'm
that's
saying
what
it is not that we are inherently here to avoid taxes. That's one point.
Sorry. Okay.
The second issue is I think it is not about business persons not paying taxes, or I would like to say it is not about that. In any society that at any point of time there are people who will evade everything that is to be evaded. They don't belong to a particular class. They could be lying in any of the classes. Only thing is, yes, a salaried person